have an update on the nematode issue too?
We're working through that. We actually, stand up for that one. That's okay. Yeah, so also, another item that was on the issue list provided by the town of Fremont was, you know, I think highlighting the golden nematodes in the area and to determine what our protocol would be and process in order to keep that contained, right? Because it could certainly have an impact on crops, undoubtedly. We also got a similar information request. We got the same question from Ag and Markets from Mike Saviola. So we've been in contact with Mike Saviola to talk to him about appropriate protocol, which will be documented and will be provided to the parties. Okay? Do we understand? Yeah.
This, your map
Yeah.
that you put on here?
Yeah. So we've been looking at that. Yeah. Spent some time on that today.
Is this, I'm not sure, Joe, is it on you guys?
Yeah, well, it's across the street on Briggs's.
What was the one over on the other side, the back side of the field?
Well, that's when they went across the field, they weren't supposed to do that. So there might be contamination there, but probably not.
But there's a spot over by the tower, that side, on you guys?
Well, that's because they started on Briggs's and come over on us.
But that's, could be there too, right? So that should
Well,
be
it
one
could
of
be.
the
They didn't
areas
find it, they
too.
got it fenced off.
They what?
They got it fenced off.
Right, so it could be there too.
Could be.
Yeah, so they do, I know there's soil sampling that can occur. That's the best way
Mm-hmm.
to not conject. But to do the soil sampling, I mean, certainly, again, we're sensitive to that. It's not our intent to, you know, to spread that, the golden nematode.
Right.
So to set up wash stations, to have the proper protocol
Mhm.
to ensure that it does. And also if there are quarantine areas, you know, if we need to do some, even some slight redesigns and things like that, yeah. So,
We're also reading too that it could just travel around by soil. It was, wind could move it too,
okay,
or birds or anything else.
yeah.
So is that gonna make a difference whether you have a turbine right in the middle of this spot or the ones around it?
Yeah, I don't predict that. I would say that as the turbine doesn't generate, doesn't create wind, right? It simply
But if it's,
utilizes
would
it,
it not go up?
but they're high.
They vibrate though, wouldn't it?
No, no, no.
Would the vibrations bother them?
So, yeah, we'll work again with ag and markets, with interested groups. Let us come up with a proper protocol for that, right, prescription, and then provide it to the parties for review.
Now, if you were to contaminate, say, stuff over this way, is there some kind of insurance policy?
So that'll go back to the protocol, it'll be similar. I'm not the expert on golden nematodes, not today, ask me again in a month or so. Yeah, my education's ramping up. But sure, I mean, let us put that together. Let's find something that's acceptable, you know, not the first time, I'm sure that people have had issue or concern. So let us work through that and we'll get back to the.
So like you said, you don't want to spread it around our town or anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a lot of agriculture.
Got it.
I think, doesn't the protocol on that, you have to wash every piece of equipment, every truck that comes, you know, comes on, you can't leave the property without,
Yeah, so you set up wash stations, portable wash stations, right?
Yeah.
Do it properly, and I think it's steam, heated water. Yeah, in order to do that. Again, it's not, you know, people understand and know how to counter this.
Right.
So let's just make sure that we develop a protocol, let's get it in some kind of written form, and then let's distribute it to the town, and certainly to ag and markets for review, and then we can implement it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All over everywhere else?
On your road use agreement, like the Howard project, they had a map of what roads the project people were gonna use, and there was speed limits. Is that what's gonna take place in this project?
Yeah, so I read through it. I know we got a little bit of work to do in conjunction with the town in order to get that completely shored up, because there were drafts that were passed back and forth some months ago. But I've seen where there are posted speed limits, right, in order to, just for construction traffic during those times as well, which I think is a good
I
thing,
think
right?
that would be a great thing with
Yeah.
the amount of
Yeah,
light traffic, horses, four-wheelers.
Yeah, exactly.
People walking
yeah.
on our roads that's gonna be worked.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, there are. In fact, the road use agreement draft, it, two things. One is it identifies roads by class, asphalt, gravel, and what shape they're in, if they're in good shape, not so good. Some need work before they can be used, right? They need some, like that we would do and upgrade that road. also a pre-construction road survey that we'll conduct, where we hire a company to come in and videotape. They videotape the roads, right, so we know current conditions. And they also will take core samples, so we understand exactly the mix. Again, I'm not the road expert, but they take core samples to see what it is, to give an assessment of the potential impact on those roads, right? And any pre-construction work that needs to be done. All that has to be identified, provided to the town, identified within the document, and then wrapped into the agreement itself, pre-construction.
I just don't wanna race track up by my.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Chip, so in regard to those designated haul routes, isn't that negotiated between you and the town? They're not set in stone, correct? Isn't that how that works? I mean, you've got a map where you wanna go, but it still has to be negotiated through the town, which roads are gonna be used?
Yeah, so we haven't, it's in discussion. I think there are only so many ways to get to certain areas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that plays into it. But also what we would say, what we would find, is like some of the roads that are in perfect condition now,
Uh-huh.
not usable, we go in and we upgrade them.
Mhm.
Like you find that at the end of the process, the roads are certainly at the same shape, but I go so far as say they're a bit better than they were before we came on the property. I guess one thing to consider that I would throw out, before I get the question, is if you have the Cohocton project being, the turbine nacelles changed out, you know, in conjunction with our project as well. Yeah, I just think that we want to coordinate with the Cohocton project and understand where their transportation routes are relative to our transportation routes, right? To just see where each party's going. Yeah, make sure they follow the same thing, like the speed limits within those and adhere to those. Very, very important. Can I just do a couple more questions? I don't want to take all night.
I just want
Yeah,
just
happy
one
to answer.
quickie.
Yep.
This is probably really silly, but like, are you gonna be considerate of like when people are going to work and the school buses and do the deliveries not at a prime time? Like when people are getting out of, Gunlock, you know, on Route 21, if you have those, it's gonna be gridlock and, you know, like I don't know what time of the day you're gonna be driving these things.
Yeah, so the town law actually stipulates that, and they've got the town law today has a Monday through Friday restriction. I think it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 to 7, yeah.
Oh, 7 in the morning,
Yeah,
7
like
at
7
night,
to
you
7.
can be driving?
We are able to use the
Oh,
roads
so
for
it's gonna-
construction, but we're restricted from using them on the weekends and holidays as well.
Oh, yeah, no, I was worried more about getting to work and getting stuck behind these things and everybody's trying to go to work and,
Yeah.
you know, but it might be-
There may be some instances when that happens.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps we could work out with the town where we're able to work on Saturdays to alleviate some of that, right? So potentially, it could happen,
Yeah,
sorry.
'cause you have school buses and
Yeah,
stuff,
sure.
and like I said, Gunlock, I know, does it 21. Just curious.
Good question.
All set?
All right, that's good.
You could sit now.
No, that's good, anyone, that's good. Or I'll stay afterwards, if anybody has any more. Thank you. Let's see what I take on.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, thanks.
Okay, next up is an update from Seth Pullen on the Article 10 review.
Sure. Some of it's been discussed here, and I know the folks in the town interested in knowing how that's going, and I believe several of you are actually individual parties as well. The town is a party, has been granted intervenor funds. Recently, and I guess I need to step back and introduce myself. Seth Pullen, our firm, Richardson and Pullen, is attorneys for the town on this. I apologize for being late getting in here. I was driving down through the snow belt, and the snow slowed me down a bit more than I expected. But
I know right where you're coming from.
yeah. But that said, glad to be here, and good to see that there's a strong turnout for this meeting. The town, through us, has submitted an issues list, which is sort of the current stage of where the Article 10 proceeding is. It's basically determining which issues are subject to dispute, litigation, evaluation, and each party has to submit those to be considered, and then, looks like in January, when that actual formal review process will begin, those are the issues that are subject to the review. So the town has submitted that, it is posted, the issues list that I've submitted is posted, in the DMM, the Public Service Department's online tracking system. There's several others who have submitted issues that I think are of concern and relevant to the town. Hunt Engineers, which is working on behalf of the town for engineering purposes to evaluate this, have just last week submitted their issues list, which is attempting to evaluate the project's sort of design as has been submitted in the application, how that lines up, especially with the criteria in the town law on the technical, the setback, and other restrictions. There will be some discussion that has to happen going forward. Part of that is Bearing Winds, through their attorney, is seeking to negotiate any of those issues that can be negotiated either with all of the parties or with certain parties to say, okay, we agree that the resolution of this issue is Bearing Winds will do thus and such. Some of that could be, for instance, setbacks. Concern is on setbacks, and we say, okay, Bearing Winds agrees that the setbacks will be no less than 1,500, 1,400, 1,200, 1,600, whatever that number is, feet from a non-project dwelling versus someone who's not has not signed a lease or a good neighbor agreement, which is in a sense another form of lease, really. As an example, if that is agreed by Bearing Winds and the town says, okay, that complies with their law, that's no longer an issue for us as long as that is maintained, then that issue would be resolved, at least vis-a-vis the town of Fremont and the Bearing Winds. So there may be some other issues like that. One example is if we have a road use agreement that's completed, and I have talked with the attorney Bearing Winds during summer. That's some work we need to do in the next coming weeks. That would potentially alleviate and address, at least as far as the town is concerned, those road use issues, if we can agree on those. Like we were saying, some of that will be determining routes, some of it will be identifying which classes of roads will be used and which classifications will be given to those roads, and whether the requirements are for certain roads, they must be at the end of the project at the same class as they are right now. There may be some roads that we negotiate in advance. They need to be moved up one class, and it's possible that just on the condition that's necessary for Bearing Winds to use them effectively without bogging down their equipment or damaging the road significantly. So some of those issues will be identified, and that agreement is very relevant. And the HCA is something we're also working on. So we've identified that will be a source of revenue to the town, and depending on what the town board decides, whether it can allocate some of that money to help fund the town's budget in a way that offsets taxes, or whether it's to say, look, okay, as we were talking about with pilot agreements, if that's going to, any offset you do to property taxes is going to reduce the rate that you get through the pilot, perhaps some of that, you may do some, but not a lot, but you can then work on infrastructure, bridges, upgrading town equipment, facilities, and potentially any town resources can be allocated a little bit differently. And depending on what the details are, In theory, and I think in practice, the intent of the HCA is primarily to offset expense and burden on the town as a municipality, primarily, and to a lesser extent to its residents, that the project may be impacted. The road usage is one of those. The personnel requirements for town highway department personnel and equipment to be involved in helping to identify and supervise. There's going to be construction of probably some of those turns, and I'm drawing a blank on the actual term for it, but when you have a corner and that long turbine blade has to make that corner, can't make a wide enough turn not to hit the road signs right there. So some of that, removing signs, identifying where that needs to be. There certainly will be some impact on the town of all of those things. So the infrastructure impacts, the personnel impacts, and other expenses. Some of the legal fees are covered by the intervenor funds. Some of the advice to the town that we provide, particularly negotiating these agreements, that's not covered by the intervenor funds. Presumably the town will be asking if that can be covered as part of the HCA, so that the town isn't having to be out of pocket for the expense and burden of having to hire attorneys, hire other consultants to make sure that the town is on a fair footing when it's negotiating these things. So I don't know if there are particular questions the board has that they want me to put out in this context, or if there's others that you want to open me up to, I'm happy to address and discuss.
Seth, I just had one quick question.
Sure.
Is it too late to change the setbacks? Because in our town law, it says 750 feet from a town, county, or state road, yet ice throws are further than that, and it also stated, based on the manufacturer's recommended setbacks, whichever was further. So, I mean, that was a concern that I had brought up to the town before, since it's 750 and ice throws are further than that. I think they were 1,500 feet. Is that something that still can be negotiated, or is that a done deal already?
It's probably too late to change it in the town law.
Mhm.
If there is a particular concern based on, for instance, ice throw,
Mhm.
For safety purposes, when there is, time comes for the application with the town for those permits, that is something that could be discussed as a condition.
Uh-huh. Okay.
If there's a particular site where we look at and say, we have concern about this particular tower in this particular location, that would be something that the town should consider in terms of
Mhm.
whether it's a waiver to the law or whether it's an additional condition on wind turbine if there's some other non-conforming element to it.
Mhm.
But the town law has been passed and
Right.
implemented, so.
I was just curious if it could
Yeah.
still be just for safety issues is all.
Yeah.
Okay. So that could still be brought up, and that was what I was concerned about. Okay.
Does anyone else have questions for Attorney Foley? Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
And next up is an update from Michael Keith from Hunt Engineers. He's been working on the Article 10 application review.
I'm Mike Keith. As you mentioned at the beginning, Bob Redden passed away last month. So I've worked with Bob pretty closely. So myself and my team will be taking over the work that Bob has started and continuing on through. As Seth mentioned, we did do an initial review of the application. We reviewed the application more for how it related to the Article 10 process in the siting board, and as it related to the wind law, the Town of Fremont wind law. We didn't get into the fine nit details for that, for instance, finishes, safety features, construction methods. We're going to get into that next, along with, we're going to work with Chip and his team to kind of go through the fine nit details of the site plans the grading, the erosion controls, the speed is currently